Title dialogue, I think, will become clear as we go along, but there are really two themes. The reason for having these evenings is set around two really key ideas which we're quite committed to at Ermysted. The first one is parent power, the idea that parents have as much, probably not more influence on the development of our young men as we do. Obviously that's our job, we're all on about education when they come here, but there are other forms of learning, as I'm sure you know, which go on at home, when they're with you, etc., etc. And any school that's serious about promoting real improvement has to involve parents. Second thing is really raising standards. This is something that's happened probably over the past 15, 20 years, is education has become a research topic. We now have large amounts of evidence about what things work, what things produce improvements in students' learning, and what things don't. Certainly when I started the profession sort of years ago, there were quite a lot of things that we did that we weren't quite sure why. They were just sort of handed down. It turns out some of those things were a really good idea. Some things the ancient Greeks did when they taught their children turn out to actually have a real basis in fact and have been confirmed by sort of modern research. And some things do not, and that's the thing that we'd like to share with you. As parents, we'd like to be aware of your importance at the top there, and also some of the things, some of the strategies, techniques we're using in school, which can be followed up at home, which I'll hopefully show you this evening. Okay? Parent power is an easy one. This always reminds me of the football. The date of this meeting, I did check the Euro 2016 to make sure that it couldn't possibly clash with any of England's games. 2 years ago, I did it with the World Cup. That was even worse. So it does strike me as like a football game. I worked it out once. The number of hours they spend with you guys, the number of hours they spend in here, it's about 3 to 1. They spend about 3 times as much time with you as they do with us. So although we're very focused on sort of overt education and stuff, you guys are equally, if not more important, and that's the idea behind the parent power thing. Really raising standards, it always makes me think of a cat I had, a little orange cat called Jack. He's a really nice cat, he's dead now. He's not funny, he was a nice cat. I used to take him to the vet's occasionally. He had sort of skin trouble and that. And I remember going through Tesco's once, they had all sorts of things that you could buy to make your cat better. And I tried some, they didn't work at all. I took him to the vet and he gave him an injection or something, much better, and charged me a great deal of money. And I was listening to why it was so expensive. And he said, well, the real reason is if you buy medicines for people even, or things like that, from a supermarket or even from a chemist, they don't actually have to have, they can't be like poisonous, they don't actually have to have any proven, tests that they are actually going to make you better. Whereas stuff prescribed by doctors and vets and things like that, they've actually been through some sort of process with some sort of proof behind them that they actually do improve the situation. And the key thing here, this is the maths bit I'm afraid, is the control group analysis. Okay? The stuff we're going to talk about this evening has real evidence, right, come on in, have a seat, based around what's called a control group analysis. If you look at the graph I've drawn, you've got two classes, A and B, one in green, one in blue. And what we're doing here is we're making sure they have their two classes as matched as possible. So they have the same number of students, same mix of genders, for example, same average IQ scores, as close to being identical as we can. We then do our magic thing, X, whatever it might be, our new way of teaching, or our new injection for cats, or whatever it might be. And then we look at the results, and the impressive bit is the bit between the green and the blue on the right-hand side. You can see the green group, who are the control group, they didn't actually do X. They didn't do anything. They just got older, basically. Most classes do better in maths at the end of the year than they do at the beginning. And they can have the most appalling teaching, really. It's just to do with the fact they're older and they've done more maths. It doesn't actually mean what they were doing is of any particular value, unless you compare them with the green class next door, who just sat and did nothing for a year, and then any differences you can see are actually to do with the thing that you've tried out. So control group analysis doesn't mean just saying, does this make the situation better? It's looking at a parallel group, a control group, who didn't try that intervention, and seeing what the difference is between the two. And if there's no real difference, then it's just they're getting older, basically, and the improvements have nothing to do with the thing that you've actually tried. Okay? Now, that sounds quite complicated to do, and it is. But the good news is a gentleman called John Hattie, who works in New Zealand, and his team have done a great deal of work. You can see the numbers there. They've tried a great deal of, done a great deal of research into educational interventions, things people have tried in the classroom, using pens, using red folders, using green folders, doing lots of homework, doing no homework, doing bits of homework, all sorts of things like that. And they've reviewed them across the world, involving, as you can see there, many studies and many students. And if this is sounding very complicated, the good news is it comes down to three very simple things. There's really only three main things which have a substantial body of control group evidence behind them. For the three things on the board there are many studies around the world where students have tried these things, like assessment for learning or whatever, and the class next door of equal ability haven't. At the end of the year, they've shown substantial gains. As we said, the control group analysis, surprisingly few things show really significant gains. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of these this evening. I've just noticed we're going to go in reverse order, so it's a bit confusing. Growth mindset, I'm going to say a little tiny bit about, just to introduce those who are not familiar with it. And we've talked about growth mindset in quite a lot of detail in previous evenings. So if that really catches your attention, you think that's really interesting, I'll direct you to the website where you can actually watch one of these presentations on growth mindsets. As I say, we don't want to keep doing the same things over and over again. Okay? Cognitive acceleration, I've been trying a bit with my year 9s. They certainly need it, I think. And, I think there's some parents in the audience. Keep quiet. I've tried a bit of that with them this evening. Some of you, I think, might notice some of their work on the front as you came in. And I've got the results of that to talk about. But the main part of the evening is devoted to assessment for learning. In historical terms, it probably came first. There is a huge body of evidence around the world that the techniques within assessment for learning produce substantial improvements in student learning. And for that reason, one of those reasons, we're changing some of the systems that we use at Ermysted to do reporting and so on. Mr. Sims and Mr. Speak will be popping up later on to talk about those quite important things, which are going to affect pretty much all year groups. Okay? Growth mindset, just very briefly, it's quite an important idea and runs contrary, I think, things that I did when I was at school, things that teachers made me do. Actually, we're running against this. In very simple terms, as I say, there's a video on our website about this in more detail. There are two kinds of mindset you can have. Nothing to do with how clever you are, it's to do with the way that you view yourself as a learner. Now on the left, you can be a fixed mindset kind of person, which means you think that how successful you're going to be is to do with your ability. I'm good at maths and I'm rubbish at French, so I expect to do well in maths questions, I expect to do well in questions on French. You don't think, compared to the growth mindset, you don't think it's anything particularly to do with effort. A growth mindset person doesn't really have any preconceptions. They think that how well they're going to do depends on how hard they work, how much effort they put in. The response to failure. Growth, fixed mindset, people tend to avoid things they don't think they're going to be able to do. So if I think I'm naturally good at maths and naturally rubbish at French, I'll want to do maths questions and I won't want to do French questions, which if you think about in terms of improvement is not a good idea. Fixed mindset, people tend to have fairly low resilience. They don't stick at things very well. Growth mindset people, as you can see there, are much more likely to stick at things and obviously therefore much more likely to improve. About 10 years ago this started off as a bit of an idea and the research evidence on this has built dramatically to the point now there are tests you can do of students' mindset to define how fixed or growth they are, and it's now turned out to be a better predictor of exam success than IQ scores. That's a bit cheeky because IQ scores were never brilliant. But this is now actually having a large impact on students' exam results. As you can see there, it does correlate very well. There are no, if you think of the top 10 most successful people, which is a good weekend for sport actually. So if you think of someone like Lewis Hamilton, for example, very, very long career, even though he's quite a young chap, and trying for a very early time, you cannot be really successful with a fixed mindset. If you give up easily, if you think, well, I'm not going to be able to do that because I'm no good at French, you just can't think like that. If any of you interview other people for jobs or been for a job interview yourself, I mean, look at those two, which of those would you improve? So the growth mindset is really important for life, not just academic life, not just qualifications, but life in the much broader sense. Fixed mindsets, as I say, I can think of students I've taught today who aspects of that, I can't do this, that sort of thing. And as I say, it's a really important area. The research evidence has been growing quite a lot. There's quite a lot of sort of popular books out about it. And I'll direct you at the end to, on our website, you can find some more information about that. Okay? But perhaps just hold those in mind next time you're talking to your son about things they're stuck in, things they can't do. Those sort of conversations, just maybe keep those two columns in mind. Come back to this, work up the list. Cognitive acceleration, again. Cognitive acceleration is basically accelerating a natural process. We naturally all develop cognitively. When you're very tiny, you can only do very simple kinds of thinking about what's in your mouth and what you've got in your hands, basically. And there's a thing there, and you move up the scale from thinking about concrete things. You can think about Teddy and Mummy and bed and food, and then you move up to be able to think about exciting things like voltage and all those sorts of things. And if you think about your own life and when you were tiny, you all move up that scale. We all do. Okay. Cognitive acceleration is about trying to accelerate that, and the curious thing about it, it's not directed at any one subject. It's just trying to make people better at thinking. And of course it claims, obviously, if it's successful, the rewards will come in every single subject. Okay? This has been developed, again, we have a video on our website about this, into a pattern called the case lessons, which would obviously the C and the A stand for cognitive acceleration. And we'll not go into detail this evening, but they focused around three slightly obvious and perhaps not so obvious things. Again, you don't have to do this in school. There are lessons to be learned outside school, in the home, all sorts of things. But the research evidence shows these three elements tend to produce cognitive acceleration. So things like cognitive conflict, giving students things they can't do. And when I first started teaching in the late 80s, I can remember having to produce different versions of worksheets for the lessons so that everybody had a piece of work that was at just the right ability for them. So nobody would find it difficult and burst into tears, and nobody would do it in 10 seconds and be sort of stuck. And the evidence suggests that isn't actually a very good way of doing it. It's actually quite good for students to have things they can't do, things they have to struggle with, they can't see the answer of immediately. Okay? Social construction is important for students to talk to other students, not to teachers, but to students, other students, about what they're thinking, about how they're going to solve the problem. And actually the difficult one, this is the difficult part, is the metacognition, getting students to think about, right, now you've solved that problem after half an hour, can you just reflect on how you've done it? Again, groups of students who have lessons like that, where the teacher gives them a problem, doesn't give them the answer, they have to work in groups talking to each other about how they're going to do it, and then at the end they reflect on how they've done it. Those types of lessons, students who do that type of thing, generally end up with, as you can see there, some quite substantial gains. And the interesting thing about cognitive acceleration, it tends to be across subjects. It tends to not just be in the subject area where they had the lesson. These improvements, if you're better able to do abstract thinking, which school subject will that help you in? Well, pretty much all of them. Okay? And that's why the CASE project, as it was known, produced some quite dramatic improvements in student. I mean, the significant there, it's about a grade to a grade and a half. Students did these case-type lessons in their science lessons in Year 9, then did nothing for Years 10 and 11, and at the end of their GCSEs came out with between a grade to a grade and a half better than the class next door, who were in the same school, similar ability, but didn't do any kind of cognitive acceleration. And again, these are things which you can do at home. Giving things, letting students work on things that they can't necessarily do, not helping them do it first time, letting them struggle with things, those sorts of things. Once they've solved something, getting them to talk to you about how they've done it. Those aren't things they can just do in school. As I said before, they can be doing that at home as well. Okay. Sorry about a big quote on the screen, but I think this is quite an important one. Professor Philip, who invented the idea of cognitive acceleration, summarised it. It's not just his work, but other work around the world suggests it's these three elements. Giving students things that they're going to struggle with, letting them think amongst themselves about how they're going to do it, and then getting them to reflect on how they've done it. That type of thing, lots of studies around the world show that type of process produces dramatic improvements in student learning. Okay. Now, I've tried to do a little bit of that with my students in Year 9, and we've had a go at it using this idea. Cognitive acceleration is linked to an idea which you might have heard more of, which is called higher order thinking. This type of thinking is basically real life thinking, where you've got problems that haven't just got one solution. They might require lots of different things to be used to solve it, imposing meaning, so you might be given a load of information, some which is irrelevant, and you have to decide which bits you're going to use. Those types of problems, not traditionally the sort of things you do in school, certainly in science, we're often about simplifying the situation. We don't ask them to analyse a spaceship. We say, here's a mass rolling down a hill or something like that, something very simple. But the evidence is, if students have a go at this kind of higher order thinking, it can really improve their learning. And again, any of you who have a life, have been to work, got married, have a job of any kind of thing, just think about your working day. Think about how many of those things you have to do. Problems that haven't got one obvious solution. Multiple solutions, all those kinds of things. Non-algorithmic means there isn't like a recipe for it. deciding what job to have, where to go, all sorts of things, what house to buy. All these things, these are real characteristics of everyday life. We often hear from employers that students coming out with qualifications aren't very useful at actual real life problems, and it's these types of things which will help. So I've been trying to do this sort of thing with my Year 9s, and we decided to do it by mysteries. As I said, a lot of science has been pre-simplified. It's been made very simple. The answers can often be quite obvious. So what I've done, or I did over the past few weeks, is to get students to look into not Newton's second law, because you can look it up. There's no argument about Newton's second law. Science is about argument, it's about solving problems, it's about deciding who's right or wrong. And there's just none of that in most of the science students do in school, because it's all absolutely agreed. If you put your hand up in one of my lessons and say, I don't agree with Newton's second law, I'd be quite impressed, but you're going nowhere really, because the evidence against you is absolutely massive. So I thought to myself, what is there in science that people can argue about? And of course a lot of it's quite high-powered science, like Hawking radiation from black holes, which isn't going to get very far. So I thought about these things. These are on the edge of science. They're not particularly, I don't know what you'd call them, pseudoscience or something like that. The Great Pyramid of Giza, was it built by aliens, etc., etc.? Is Bigfoot, the Neanderthals that sort of live in forests and those sorts of things? The city of Atlantis, all kinds of stuff like that. Are they legends? Are they myths? I called them mysteries. I gave them to Year 9. I said, pick one, go away, read all you like about it. But what I want is, on a piece of paper, is the scientific evidence that you think worthy of supporting it, and the ones that you think that don't support it. Okay? And the reason for doing that, as I say, you can have a look on the way out. We've got some examples there. I did quite a good job, actually. A lot of them complained their heads hurt afterwards, because that's quite difficult. You can't just tip the information off Google, because one website will say, yeah, absolutely, there's tons of proof here, the aliens built the pyramids. And another website was actually rubbish. And you've actually got to think about it. You've got to weigh up the evidence between the two. And if we go back to our list of higher order thinking, you can see there, these are problems that don't have a single solution. The answer isn't 42, the answer isn't 7 or stuff like that. There are many solutions to these, many different arguments. You've got to balance different factors. You've got to look at a bewilderment. I mean, you put some of these things into Google, you get an enormous amount of stuff. And the true science there is to be able to look at it and say, well, that's interesting. That bit there probably is worth having, because that's like a piece of historical evidence. And just picking stuff out, I thought, was a way of doing higher order thinking. Certainly students got quite into it, I must admit. Whether it's going to make them naturally smarter, I don't know. But the evidence suggests if they're being made to do that kind of thing on a daily basis, then we can expect them to learn more effectively. Okay? Come back to our 3. We've nearly worked up to the top now, so I'm the warm-up act, basically. The 2 main events this evening are to do with assessment for learning, which I'll just zip through very quickly. Again, very simply, these techniques, these 5 techniques have been found, and assessment for learning is probably the oldest one with a control group record. So the evidence for this is really, really huge. The students who have lessons with these 5 sorts of things in regularly outperform students of similar ability in the class next door who just learn in more traditional ways. Okay? Sharing objectives is kind of obvious, that students are clear what is it we're trying to learn today rather than just what exercises we're doing out of the book. Questioning, as I say, in staff inset and training, we've done quite a lot of work on questioning. Questioning that actually makes people think. Really simple example is the difference between open and closed questions. So not asking students what's 2 plus 2, but asking students to make up 3 sums when the answer's 4. Can you feel your brain going into second gear? 2 plus 2, you don't think. You don't need any thinking, do you? You just know the answer. The minute you turn the question around, make it what's called an open rather than a closed question, immediately you can feel your brain, the answer's not there. If I say 2 plus 2, you've got 4 in your head straight away and you didn't have to think about it. 3 sums that come to the answer 4, so really useful questioning. Or the student who puts out can only come up with 2. As a teacher, that tells me something about that student's learning. So questions that are going to make students think, that actually produce answers, that actually give the teacher some information as well. Okay. Peer assessment and self-assessment. I always think when I was at school, self-assessment was called cheating, but it's now quite fashionable. And it works quite well, I must say. Obviously, students are always doing exams in this country, and certainly my years 10, 11, 12 and 13 classes, we're often working with mark schemes, and hopefully by now they're quite good at actually looking at an exam board mark scheme and actually saying, well, I've done this question, I've done all of this, it's just this last bit, I don't say why the answer's 7 or something like that. Students who can work in that way, they don't need me to come round and tell them, yeah, that's right, that's wrong. A lot of marking these days. It's a high volume industry in this country, marking. There's a lot of pressure on examples to get things done. So the questions are often relatively short. They don't like questions obviously massively difficult to mark, and there's no way that it's not possible for students to do that. So actually being able to assess your own work, peer assessment obviously assessing other people's. As I say, I would say that was a strength of our lads here. They're very good at that. I quite often give my students, for example, say a 10-mark GCSE question. I give it out to a class of 30 kids, that's 300 marks. They exchange papers, they mark each other's, I read out the mark scheme. I then take them in and check them, and I put money on the fact if I've got effectively 300 marks there coming back, I'd be unlikely to change more than 2 or 3. Students are really good at A-level as well, at understanding, obviously, what the markers are wanting, what's on the mark scheme, and doing that as well. And they're getting better, I think, at putting feedback on. Instead of writing, you got 6 out of 10, you're bonkers, or something like that, which may be true, I say to them, you may be bonkers, but actually that isn't going to help them very much. Putting the feedback on, the last one there, getting formative feedback, not 6 out of 10. This has led to something that's a bit radical in teaching, which is comment-only marking, where you actually put just a comment at the end, you don't actually put a mark out of 10. Again, everybody finds this bonkers, because almost everybody, I'm sure, when they went to school, there were numbers out. But the evidence is, if you put 9 out of 10, the student is really keen to read the comment. And of course, they're the student who just doesn't need it. If they've got 9 out of 10, they don't particularly need to read the comment. The student got 2 out of 10, thinks, oh, 2 out of 10, don't want to read it. And of course, they're the students who absolutely need to read the comment. But if you put 2 out of 10, they're not necessarily going to read it. It's the number often takes students away from concentrating on what's there. So comment-only marking, giving what's called formative feedback, not just a number, but information that's going to tell you how to improve. And as I say, students here are very good at it, I think, actually helping to do that for each other through peer assessment. Those 5 things, a huge body of evidence. As I say, if you look on our website, as I'll show you at the end, you can see more evidence of this, but all of these, for probably the past 20 years now, evidence has been building up. These things really make a difference. Okay? For that reason, I think this is where dialogue comes in. All the things I've been talking about, with some examples, you can see. Pretty much everything that I've been talking about this evening, the assessment for learning, the cognitive acceleration, the growth mindset, within all of them you can find an element of dialogue. And for all this new whizzy research that we've been doing that confirms some things we've been doing for years and says actually some things probably weren't a good idea, really old ideas. There's Socrates from ancient Greece, and his big idea was dialogue. He said all learning comes through dialogue, through argument, through 2 people exchanging views, which is why what I've been doing, lecturing at you, has been a complete waste of time. But you can see in assessment for learning, peer assessment, formative feedback, questioning, all those kinds of things, cognitive conflict, social construction, talking to each other, loads of things I just talked about. Someone once said there's nothing new under the sun. And if he was still alive today, I think he'd probably be chuckling at all this new research that's basically showing a fundamental thing. Me standing at the front yapping on, you're going to learn not very much. It's dialogue that is the real part of learning. And it's that idea, I think, that's driven 2 really important changes to the reporting system we're making at Ermysted.